Get to know something about who you are. Could you tell me, where is home, and what does home mean to you, and how did it contribute to the person you are today?
Okay, so I've been in the UAE for about 10 years now, so the UAE is my home, and it's a place that I very much identify with, the people, the culture, and it is my home. My family is here as well. My other home, which I'm originally from, is Australia. So I grew up near Coogee Beach, if you know Sydney, or if you know Bondi Beach, which is a famous beach. I grew up in a beach just next to it. And I come from a very loving home, and my parents taught us a lot about building up our character and teaching us about morals and values and how to treat people. We also travelled and lived in different parts of the world where I got to experience different cultures and different religions, and just learning to interact and learn how to communicate with people from different backgrounds. So we grew up playing outside, which is what the Australian sort of lifestyle is where you just climb trees, you play in the dust, you play in the dirt, all the kids come together, and we didn't really do computer games, and my mum never let us watch television when we were kids. It was just a very, very beautiful, very innocent upbringing, which I think a lot of children don't get the chance to experience these days. So it was back in the day when you could just play outside with all the kids, and everybody would play football or handball, and you didn't have a lot of toys. You just made do, and you were very creative. So I grew up like that.
Imagination.
Yes, and my family was just very, very loving, and my mum was always there to wipe every tear from our eyes and just take care of us. And so that's
just a very nurturing and loving environment to grow up in.
For sure, very accepting and very loving. And then I just came to the UAE, and I never ever thought that I would end up staying for so long, and I just got very attached to the people and the culture. I think it's a very misunderstood part of the world, and I just felt that I was called here to be here and do something, with myself here. It's 10 years has passed.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting that some of the factors that you mentioned while growing up, collectivism, family, that sort of loving, nurturing, hospitable environment is what the values of the Emiratis are all about. So you may have connected with those as well.
They're very family orientated. So people here are very family orientated, and if you know anyone that's Emirati, they really embrace you into their families,
yes.
And you really become a part of the culture. And so I think it's been a wonderful experience. Like 10 years ago, you would meet people in such a casual way, even His Highness Sheikh Mohammed, and I was here when the late Sheikh Zayed was alive, so you would actually interact with them on a personal level, like they'd go shopping in a shopping mall, and
yes.
You'd meet people like that. They're very humble, so it's not like that with our governments in the Western world, so
right.
It's different, and it was an interesting experience.
Very close, isn't it?
Yeah,
much more intimate. How about you, Shiny?
Well, I'm not be able to say I have a family like that, or have a family like that now. I come from Australia as well. I was born in Perth and pretty much grew up on the beach, very much an outdoors person. But unlike you, when you got to travel, I didn't leave Australia until I was 19. So my first trip out of Australia was by myself into Thailand. And from there, pretty much I've left Australia and continued my journey. I think because I didn't travel so much, as soon as I left, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much out there. So it's just kind of continued from there. But as I say, a very healthy lifestyle, grew up on the beach, sun, sand, surf, pretty much really what Dubai is like here, I guess. That's probably why I connect so well with being here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see the parallels as you're talking about your childhood, both of you, and that now you've settled in a location that is very different to that, but yet the bedrock of the environment, yes, the warmth, the cultural threads, and the surroundings seem to be. So do you guys go to the beach often then here? Do you?
Every weekend.
Because a lot of people complain. They say we live in Dubai, but we never use the wonderful beach, and we are most vitamin D deficient. Do you know that here? We suffer from vitamin D deficiency. So ladies, please take care of your vitamin D. Very, very important. Great. And so living, how many years did you say you've been living
5 years. I've been for 5.
For 5 years. With your family?
Yes.
Your immediate family. Okay, great. Now, of course, where you are today is as a result of lots of different sort of building blocks. It's not one moment, or it's not, at a particular spark that happened. There's an evolution that happened, that results in where you are today. But could you describe to me, what was your main inspiration in doing what you did with the books that you have published? What led to the fact that that has resulted in this wonderful outcome of your 2 books?
Can I go first?
Yeah.
Okay, so Faces of the Middle East is a documentation of the social and minority groups in the Arab world, and they're usually groups that are, some of them are misunderstood. And I think if I look back, it was a journey of about 7 years where I was just, traveling and documenting these groups in the rural parts of the Arab world where most people don't get to go. So they're not the type of people you'll meet when you're, touring in the cities or in the main parts of the Middle East. They're out in the mountains or in the villages or in the townships. And I think it was inquisitiveness, but also just that I wanted to address an issue as a journalist where I wanted to identify groups of people that were misunderstood and misrepresented, and I wanted to show through the power of the visual image of how people live, and that there's a common thread of humanity that unites us. And so it's a combination of a passion and then also like an inquisitiveness to understand and communicate that leads you to that place. But a book is sort of like a baby, so if you have kids, it's something that's a part of you and your soul, and you birth it out in whatever you produce, and it always.
How long was it? How long did it take you to?
7 years.
7 years, yeah.
So
that's a very long gestation period, isn't it?
Yeah. So, and it's something that you just like everybody that buys my book. It's actually I'm sharing a part of me with them, and even a lot of the people in the book, I go back and I visit them. I have relationships with them. I've seen their kids. I'm a part of their life and the pain that they're suffering, or some people are coming from conflict zones, or they've been in war zones, or they've been in like a very serious conflict. So I've been able to build that relationship and share that with them. And there's a power in a photograph. There's power in photographs where you can communicate a message and say 1,000 words with one image. And I think just looking into that and researching that and going into detail was just a passion for me. But it was really tough. I mean, when a book is a concept or your project is a concept, it's hard to get people to believe in you and support you because they don't see it, they don't see the dream. But in your heart, you know it, and you just got to follow that dream. And you've got to keep believing in that. And there was many people that said, don't do it, it's not going to work, it's not going to happen, don't go.
So challenging.
I got turned down by like 50 publishers, they rejected it before I got published. And so there was lots of things like that you have to deal with that a lot of people don't see when you're a published author, is that you've got to go through all of that. And that's one thing when authors get together, it's like, oh, you become a little family, it's because you understand the process.
The hardship.
Like, we made it.
Yeah, it's true. It's very, very tough, isn't it, the process of going through that. How about for you, Shani? What was it like?
The inspiration?
Yeah.
The inspiration came from when I used to live in London. So before living here, I was in London for 8 years. And as you were saying before, I used to work with some of the best names in fashion. So when I came away from working with them, they kind of leave quite an imprint on you and quite an impression. And I got to a point where I was like, well, what am I going to do? And that was the big question that I got to. So I first of all took myself on a charity bike ride through Kenya and rode for 4 days on a bike with my now husband. I don't know how he is my husband now after dragging him there. But anyway, so we were there for 4 weeks. 4 weeks in total, so 4 days doing the charity bike ride. Then we went and had a week on a farm on a shamba, and we photographed the beautiful women of Africa. So my question started there: what is beauty? Why was Kate Moss always on the front cover of Vogue? And we were constantly shooting her, and she was always in the magazine. And I was asking myself, why are these women not on the front cover? They're as beautiful and equally as beautiful on the inside and outside. To me, what made the difference? So it was my own quest to really find out about beauty, about inner beauty. And then when I moved here 5 years ago, I brought that project here. So Inner Beauty, Women of the UAE is all about the inner beauty of women, and it's a continual study of inner beauty and what makes you feel beautiful, really.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
You've both touched upon this topic of imagery as a medium to communicate. Why do you think it's different, and why didn't you write about? You're both incredibly intelligent and articulate, and I'm sure you've got beautiful writing throughout the book, but why choose photography as the main medium to communicate these messages?
Mm-hmm. For myself personally, photography is just one of several mediums that I use. So my background's more in television, but I do love photography, and it's something that I studied at university, so I've always done it. Like, as a photographer, you never stop shooting, actually. You're always shooting. Like, I've always got my camera with me. I always see images and stories in people, in places, in the atmosphere. Like, I'm always capturing images. And I think for this particular project, it's because an image can tell 1,000 words. It just speaks stories and volumes about people. And during that time, I was shooting in those locations, and I was doing programs, TV shows, and like, for example, Markia Lebanon was the 2006 bombing of southern Lebanon. And we were focusing on something totally different. And I wanted to show the integrity and the beauty of people despite the consequences of what they're suffering and what they're going through. I wanted to show a different face to the Middle East that's not about bombings and wars and all the negative things, and I wanted to focus on the positive things and show the pride of the people. And we don't really get to see the Arab world like that. We have to see images that are always negative, and we always think terrorism. Like usually when we go to JFK, they're like, do they make you wear that wire? Can you walk on the streets? Can you drive? Like, these are the questions, and it's such a narrow way of thinking.
Yes.
And the images I wanted to show from the Middle East were very realistic and very organic.
And diverse, incredibly diverse. When you see her book, you'll see that really appreciate the diversity of the images as well as yours. What about interpretation of these images, Sharni? Do you think images are perhaps more personally interpreted rather than words?
Absolutely. I mean, just look at this, the pictures. I mean, if I think about some of the women who are in my book, not only getting them to be in front of the camera, but getting them to feel relaxed in front of the camera is another thing. And then just seeing that quick
what
glimpse.
Was that like?
That's difficult, very difficult. It took me many, many years to be able to master that. But it's just a little glimpse. You just see a little glimpse of hope, a little glimpse of beauty, or a smile, and kind of they just light up in some way. Really lovely, actually. And I could never put that into words.
It's funny because we've got the majority of women like that, and then we've got some women who just love the camera, right?
Yeah.
they're great posers. But all you need to do is go through Facebook and see.
Yeah.
Some people really love their profile pictures in any situation and setting they're able to post, but many women struggle with that.
Yeah, and most of the women that I photographed did struggle with it. They're not comfortable with themselves, they don't like their portrait being taken, they don't like the way they see themselves when they see the picture, they have a different view of themselves, and they always shy away, and you can see their face, screw up, and their toes and fingers curl and everything, But it was beautiful in the end. By the end of it, they looked at their picture and like, that's all right, actually.
Yeah.
It's a nice switch.
Right, so as the audience member looks through these pictures, they can write their own story, can't they? Because it's open to so much interpretation.
Absolutely.
You're not actually interpreting it for them through the stories.
Which is what I wanted to represent with the women in my book. When you have a look through, or if you have already, you'll notice all of them are on a black, white or grey background, and it's because I've taken away any of their personal belongings and taken them into a generic set which doesn't show anything about how much money they earn or what sort of house they live in or the environment they were brought up with. It's all about in here, and you see them having fun and enjoying themselves. And when you look at that on an international scale, again going back to what you were saying, it teaches people, or it shows people and educates people that the women here are not suppressed, they're actually quite proactive, they're very educated, and the women here are really leading the way, paving the way actually in the UAE for the rest of the Middle East and GCC too. So it's quite interesting from that perspective as well.
Absolutely. Now, in terms of capturing images, when you're an author and you're